basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing. What the they're doing. You understand that? Basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing. Do you understand that?
全球市场时间要来持续关注的是中东局势。尽管现在美国总统川普就发文表示说，以色列和伊朗已经停火了，但是就在停火之前，双方还是持续的互攻。这是以色列南部的贝尔谢巴有一栋7层楼的公寓，在24号被伊朗的飞弹击中。来看一下当时的画面。根据路透社取得监视器画面，可以看到这其中一栋高楼都被飞弹击中的瞬间，先是冒出了一团橘色火光，接着传出了巨大爆炸声响。不但一旁停放的车辆被触动的警报器，也有这个 鸟群受到惊吓而飞起来，爆炸的威力看起来是相当的惊人。好，川普其实在今天就宣布了，以色列和伊朗从台北时间的中午12点要开始停火，但是就在这个停火正式生效之前，伊朗就对以色列发射了今天的第6波飞弹的袭击，以色列的海法市也响起了空袭警报。以色列全境多个城市在24号一早就响起了空袭警报，空中可以看到来袭的伊朗的飞弹被以色列的防空系统给拦截，而伊朗在今天发射10到15枚的飞弹，其中有1枚攻破了以色列的防空网，击中了城市的一栋7层楼的公寓。从现场的画面可以看得出来，公寓的建筑受损相当的严重，上半部已经塌陷，至少有导致5个人死亡。好，到现在这个停火协议到底是玩真的还是玩假的？外界真的是看了母萨萨。好，带您一起来整理整个时间线。川普是在台湾时间今天，也就是24号的清晨6点多的时候，他是在他的社群发文指出说，以色列和伊朗现在已经停火了。而随后他又发文指出，以色列、伊朗的停火已经开始生效了，似乎就是向两国来喊话，不要再违反这个停火的协定。那川普在一开始的时候就宣布这个停火的声明当中，表示停火会分成几个阶段来进行。首先，在台湾时间今天中午12点钟，伊朗要先停止攻击，那么以色列则是在今天下午的1800就会跟进。时间再往后推12个小时，川普就写战争将会被视为是结束。但是就在川普的这个发文的贴文一出之后，停火说这个短短生效1个小时之后呢，现在根据以国的媒体《以色列时报》的报道，以国国防军现在再度侦测到伊朗有发射飞弹，防空系统在设法要拦截。在北部地区的几个分钟之内呢，其实在全境也响起了空袭警报。而现在以国防长表示将会强烈回应，并且要锁定伊朗的首都，也就是德黑兰市要进行一个攻击。好，现在川普就自曝说，其实呢双方是有在调停的，包括了以色列还有伊朗都有找到他，希望可以寻求和平。而且他更在自己的社群发布了多张图，就宣传说川普说的一切都是对的，更是发布了这一张他自己做的梗图，是以粗体的大写字写下川普说的都是对的，而且内部是他亲吻着美国国旗的照片。一开始本来很沉默的以色列，本来大家都在想说，这个川普的停火协议是川普自己说的吗？真的有取得到伊朗还有以色列两国的认可吗？但是后来纳坦雅胡出来说话了，就说已经有同意美方提出跟伊朗双边停火的这个协议，也警告说任何违反停火的行为都会做出强而有力的回应。但是就在此话说完没有多久，以国的军方现在就说伊朗还是持续的对他们攻击。而现在美国的媒体也揭露了整个停火的内幕，美联社引述了美国外交官的说法，指出川普其实有跟以国的总理有直接沟通，确保这个停火是可以实施的。而另外其他的人在做什么呢？包括了这个是副总统范斯，还有国情卢比欧，以及川普总统的特使威科夫，直接透过了直接或者是间接的管道跟伊朗方面有所接触。而纽时的报道也是引述了外交圈人士的说法，指出卡达也在这个停火协议当中扮演一个重要的角色，因为卡达是有代表美方来斡旋，希望可以说服伊朗同意跟以色列来停火。但是这个停火目前看起来好像效用没有很大，因为以军就指控了还是持续被伊朗的飞弹攻击。现在以国的军方就说了，上一次的这个攻击来自伊朗的飞弹的袭击，导致至少有3个人死亡，8个人受伤。
Iranian and Israeli media channels now report that a ceasefire between the two nations has taken effect. President Trump also confirmed that, and just in the last several minutes has been urging the sides not to violate the ceasefire. Just hours ago, the president claimed the countries had reached out to him, in his words, almost simultaneously about peace.
美伊的领袖其实有通过电话说，只要伊朗不要再发动新轮的攻击的话，那么以国是会同意停火的。但目前看起来，伊朗还是持续攻击，所以这个停火协议到底有没有效呢？目前外界还是不得而知。
There still is a lot of public anger unloading here on the streets of Tehran. Thousands of people have come here to Revolution Square, first and foremost to criticize U.S. President Trump and to vow revenge for those strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. One of the interesting things that we're seeing on the ground now here is that it's not only conservatives and hardliners who are here, but also people who say they're normally quite critical of the Iranian government.
Even if missiles rain down on my head, I will stay here, she says, and I will sacrifice my life and my blood for my country. This member of parliament says a lot of those standing here chanting slogans against the United States may have been critics of the policies of the Islamic Republic. But today, all of us are standing in one line behind the supreme leader.
People now chanting death to America here at Revolution Square, and you can really feel how angry a lot of them are towards President Trump. Of course, the Iranian government has said that it reserves the right to retaliate for those strikes on the nuclear facilities, saying that it is their right to have nuclear enrichment. It is their right to have a nuclear program, and it's not something that they're going to allow the Trump administration to take away from them. And that is certainly also the sentiment that we're seeing here on the streets of Tehran.
Well, by the reporting I've received, there were at least a dozen that were used. You could see 6 entry points at the Fordow facility, so it's quite possible that there were bunker buster bombs that followed the initial strikes into the same holes to reach deeper into the facility. It is the first time they've been used in combat. Of course, they've been tested extensively, and they appear to have worked as advertised, although we won't know for several days the actual extent of the damage. So there are at least 3 ways that U.S. intelligence will determine the effectiveness of the strikes. One is satellite imagery. We can see what we can see from above. The second is signals intelligence. So the Iranians will be chatting about what happened, and we'll be intercepting those communications and perhaps decrypting them. And then finally, the Israeli intelligence services have human intelligence operators on the ground and paid informants, and then they'll get some information that way. So between the 3 methods, the hope is that we'll have a pretty good handle on the extent of the damage and whether the nuclear program has survived in any form.